We now turn our spotlight on airports. The centre has tightened guidelines for travellers from foreign shores. Further, those from at-risk nations, which include all of Europe and South Africa, would have to mandatorily undergo an RT-PCR test and a minimum 7-day home quarantine if the report is negative. So, how are the COVID tests panning out across airports? Joining us now, Chetan Kohli, the Chief Operating Officer of Genestrings Diagnostics. Genestrings runs the testing facility at the Delhi airport. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the programme. Mr. Kinra, let me start by asking you, I know that there's been a flurry of meetings that have happened between the airport authorities, the Civil Aviation Ministry, as well as diagnostic companies operating at the airports. How much have you been able to streamline operations? Have things improved in terms of wait times, etc.? What is the way forward? And Chetan, the Delhi airport has seen chaos as well, just as we heard there from Mr. Kinra, the minister making a surprise visit and so on and so forth. But you've added capacity at the airport. Have things improved significantly, and what is the road ahead? Many experts suggest that since people are already arriving with an RT-PCR certificate, it perhaps makes more sense to do an antigen test and let people leave, as opposed to this 6-hour, 7-hour wait at the airport.
Things are a little different here in Delhi. We are not only given an option of RT-PCR, which will take 5 to 6 hours, but there is also an option to go for the molecular rapid test, which is the Rapid PCR, currently also happening for Dubai and Canada departures. Even to our surprise, almost 80% of the passengers are actually opting for it, despite of it being higher in terms of cost, because it does save them almost 4 to 5 hours of waiting time at the airport. So I think there is definitely a need to go for the molecular test rather than just the rapid antigen test, given the sensitivity and the specificity of the difference between the specificity of both the tests. So I will strongly recommend, and I'm sure my colleagues from the other lab will also agree, that molecular test is the way to go if the intention is to safeguard the international borders. However, yes, there are certain tasks.
But what about pricing then, Chetan? I mean, at 4,000 rupees, that's fairly pricey and expensive for a large number of people. I mean, the difference between an RT-PCR at 800 and 4,000 is significant. So is there any conversation with the government on being able to reduce costs?
So the price is 3,500, for example, in Delhi, and it was about 4,500 when we started off about 2 months ago. So we have already brought it down by 1,000 rupees, which is a function of reduced direct and indirect costs, which is basically the vendors that we are dealing with. So, for example, we are using a certain manufacturer's machines, and the prices do come down as and when the volumes typically go up. So we have happily passed on that benefit to the passenger rather than keeping that with us. And it will happen. We've seen that with RT-PCR long back. It was a 4,000 rupees something test, which is now at 500 rupees. I think that's how it will progress. So even with Rapid PCR, I see that progression happening gradually over the next 6 months. That's what it is. Ultimately, there are companies who are invested in the technology. There are companies who are invested in the research for these rapid tests. So I'm sure they will also have a gradual, earning phase or recovery phase, and then bring the price down.
Well, recovering costs from passengers who have no choice because this is mandatory. I don't know how fair that is with, and we will just have to wait to see what the global experience is. And on the back of that, perhaps there will be decisions taken by the Indian government. But for now, all international passengers arriving from at-risk countries need to go in for a mandatory RT-PCR test on arrival. And Chetan and Sushant Kinra's companies at this point in time at the Delhi and the Mumbai airports trying to enhance capacity to ensure that things improve. But we're dealing with large numbers, and the RT-PCR test requires a minimum of 6 hours between taking the test and getting the results. So that is just how it is going to have to be, at least for now. Chetan and Mr. Kinra, always a pleasure. Many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. We will take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment.